Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Saturday Night Horror Reviews. It's JBM from Mr. Creepshow 9. And this is my first viewing in the House franchise. The first one came out in 1986. I got this in a VHS horror lot. Haven't watched it until then. You can even view it on YouTube if you dare. And two heavyweights were involved in the making of this, Sean Cunningham and Steve Miner, the guys who brought you the original Friday the 13th films in the early 80s. So this was the mid-80s, and I haven't really heard the story of how this developed or anything. They didn't write the script or have the story or anything, but they produced and directed it. And so they were able to raise $3 million on it and earned close to over $20 million at the box office. So let's set this up. As you might imagine, it is a haunted house film set in California. It's a really grand, spatial, ornate, tremendous Victorian style house that they have, or that they rented or shot in. I don't know if they shot in the studio in the interior, but I'd say it was probably spatial enough to even film it in there, but who knows. So, in the opening scene, we get this woman. Well, this young chap returns to give this old lady her groceries, and he ends up finding her suicidal corpse hanging, actually oscillating back and forth like a pendulum. How that's happening, still I have no idea. It must have been a fresh suicide, even though she looked decayed for a while. So she must have looked like that when she was still alive or something. So then they cut to our main character, and his connection to this character is who was his aunt. And our main character just so happens to be a famous horror novelist, so this is a good character. Builds my intrigue here. And the way they introduce him is really good, I thought, and a great scene. He's at his own book signing, and he interacts with his fans, and they really make characters out of them. They make them into weirdos and really quirky, to the point where they're not extras. They really make characters out of them. And one of them asks, "What's your next book?" Completely intrigued and curious. And he goes, "It's on the Vietnam War." And it was a total devastation to this fan. And it's like you could totally relate to this. Like, if it's your favorite author and you can't wait to find out what their next book is. Because they don't like to reveal it till it's close to, like, done. It at least has, like, a few revisions or something. And, then you find out it's some, like, completely not in the genre that he writes, and it's totally devastating. And, so they really pound this into your head, like, he's a Vietnam vet, and his war story's suppressed, and he feels a beckoning to get it out of him. It's blazing inside him. He has to tell this story, even though no one wants to hear it. And he returns to his aunt's house, where he informs the realtor straight up that it's haunted. And unshockingly enough, he decides to spend time there to really get away, because he's also just so happens to be going through a divorce. And what do we got here? So he's like, "Yeah, I'm staying." And night one, he's already got writer's block. And the boredom begins, and he just starts meandering down memory lane. His aunt just so happened to raise him, so he grew up in that house, essentially. And she was an eccentric woman. They show her in flashbacks, and she like haunts it like regularly. I think he even sees her opening night, like, oh, and she like kills herself again as a ghost. Like the hallucinations start, and he contemplates taking prescription drugs. Like, he has a whole cabinet full of them. Like it was his aunt's. Like, he goes to take his aunt's, like, Ambien. And he thinks better of it. So he doesn't take it. Okay, so next day, they use a lot of sunshine. They lose a lot of California sunshine, so it kind of takes you out of the realm. Even though it's described as a horror comedy nowadays, they try to take it 100% serious, and I'll get into that as we go here. So his neighbor, insert comic relief guy, I forget his name, but he's a common actor. He was in that movie The Man of the House, a bunch of 90s movies. Big guy, pretty funny. He's like, I'm your biggest fan. Actually, he doesn't even recognize him at first, and he's just like, I'm your biggest fan, and I just so happen to have one of your books shoved down my pants. He's like a total creep and weirdo, and really not even that funny, and he just looks like a guy who collects child pornography and never washes his hands. And he kind of stalks him and follows him around and acts weird just to like. And the writer himself has his own eccentricities and strange behavior. He gets back into character by like dressing up in Vietnam mode. Oh, you're in Vietnam, eh? Tell me more about it. So you could bore me to tears. And the viewer is just subjected to these Vietnam flashbacks. And as a horror fan, you're just completely anguished. Let's move on here. Attacked by the closet monsters. The 80s props begin, and then the strange creatures start popping out. Flap, and then at one point, like a mounted swordfish on the wall is like starts flapping, and they just this is when the movie just crosses the threshold of respectability, and he ends up blasting it with a shotgun, and it squeals to death like a pig. Oh, it's gonna squeal like a pig, and it does. It lets out its little wail, and then it dies, and he releases the demonic soul from it. Inanimate objects coming to life. That's what we get here. And the film is still taking itself seriously too, if you're wondering. But I'm not, of course. And his wife ends up showing up because his nosy neighbor ends up paranoid and calls his wife like, dude, he's losing it, you better show up. So she shows up and like immediately turns into a monster. There's like no dialogue between them. She just like comes around the corner and is like a monster. She looks like she's related to like, she's like the sister of like the monster from Funhouse or something. And he ends up blasting her away with like the shotgun also. These are like back-to-back scenes here, like no gap in between. And Harold, the fat neighbor, he witnesses it. He actually doesn't see him killing his wife. He thinks that he's like trying to kill himself. And he calls the police on his pink telephone. And you're like, yeah, he's definitely a pedophile. Is what you're thinking his character is. Not to malign him or anything, but that's what you think as a viewer here. And the cops show up, and it's a stupid suspense scene, like, oh, am I gonna get caught? I don't know, I'm paranoid. And after the cops leave, like, his wife gets resurrected, and it's so stupid, I don't know, he like tries to kill it and bury it, and then out of nowhere, I look up and, like, I leave to, like, like smoke or something, and I come back, and he's, like, babysitting some hellion. And this Hellion's like is like a 2-year-old, and he like has like the standard like common like prevalent mullet of the late 80s like already, and he's like under 2. And so he eventually, let's just sum this up. He eventually comes up with a scheme to thwart the monsters, and this scheme involves a mattress and a harpoon gun. And they're still taking the theme and everything dead serious. It's so, then it just slips into a realm of combating it and like foolhardy and ridiculousness. And before you know it, he's grappling off off the edge of a toilet down into like abyss, which leads into water, which leads into him finding his son who drowned, which leads into him bringing him out of that realm, which leads to him, us as the audience, realizing why he needs to write about Vietnam is because he betrayed or abandoned or whatever, or didn't like put down one of his platoon comrades. So his platoon comrade comes back as, his name's Big Ben, and he comes back as a zombie, of course. And they fight in a bunch of foolishness, and you're like, please just end this. Which they do. I mean, the house goes down in a blaze. I think Hell House went down in the same way. So did a lot of other horror houses, you know. And this is the end of this. And I can't even believe this got made into a franchise, really, because it just turns in... I don't even know what's up with the sequels. If you've seen them all, like, I feel sorry for you. They came out with all of them. Even the fourth one made, like, money. I don't even know. They came out with the fourth one by 1992. So they made 4 of them between 1986 and 1992. Anyway, this is getting way too long. Tune in next Saturday. Check out which horror movie we review. It's always a random one. So, tune in. Love to hear your comments. Thank you for watching. This was JBM from Mr. Creepshow 9. I'm out. Hate me now.